Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we wander through the quiet heart of Hogwarts into a tale whispered only in the stillest hours. The story of the tower that once stood proud among the castle's spires and the classroom it held, a room that has not been seen in living memory. Or so the students believe. The evening has fallen gently over the grounds, a velvet blue sky embracing the turrets and towers. The black lake is calm, holding the moon's reflection like a silver coin. The air carries the faint scent of pine from the forbidden forest, mingling with the warm aroma of stone that has basked in centuries of candlelight. In the great hall, the last clinking of cutlery has faded, and the house tables stand polished and empty, their surface still faintly warm from the glow of enchanted candles above. The corridors are hushed, save for the occasional soft creak of wood or the distant whisper of a portrait shifting in its frame. Somewhere far away, the rhythmic hoot of an owl echoes through an open window. The sconces along the walls burn low, their golden light pooling softly on the flagstones. It is a familiar warmth, the feeling of a place that is vast and grand, yet somehow always a home to those who dwell within it. But tonight, that warmth is laced with something else, a subtle note in the air, like a question hanging just out of reach. There is an unspoken pull, a hint that one of the castle's oldest secrets might be ready to reveal itself. In the upper reaches of Hogwarts, past the well-known classrooms and beyond the familiar staircases, there are places few visit, places where the dust lies undisturbed and the light through the windows feels older somehow. One of those places, it is said, was a tower. And then, one day, it was simply gone. This is not the kind of mystery that rushes to meet you. No, it is the sort that lingers patiently, drawing you closer with quiet curiosity rather than urgency. The kind that welcomes you to look deeper, to notice the details, to listen for the stories hidden in the smallest sounds. So tonight, we will wander together through these halls, listening to the castle's breath, tracing its secrets, and perhaps, if we are patient, finding the trail that leads to a tower lost to time. If you find yourself enjoying this gentle step into Hogwarts' hidden corners, you might wish to keep this place in your mind and return for more nights like this. For now, take a deep breath, let the warmth of the castle surround you, and let's begin our quiet search for the tower that vanished. The corridors of Hogwarts were quiet, their golden light spilling in pools along the worn flagstones. In this stillness, our story's companions began to appear, not in a sudden rush, but in the natural way one notices the familiar among the ordinary. It was Hermione Granger who first passed through the glow, her arms filled with books whose spines whispered of ancient spells and half-forgotten charms. She moved with the determined grace of someone who could balance curiosity and responsibility in equal measure. A strand of hair had fallen loose from her neat plait, and without looking up from the page she had been reading as she walked, she tucked it back into place. Her expression was thoughtful, the faint crease between her brows suggesting her mind was already turning over the puzzle of the vanished tower even before the search had truly begun. From the far end of the hallway came Harry Potter, his footsteps light but purposeful, his eyes, always bright, with a mix of alertness and wonder, swept along the arches as if expecting to find the mystery waiting around the next corner. The soft shuffle of his trainers against the stone and the faint swish of his cloak seemed to blend perfectly into the quiet rhythm of the castle's night. He offered Hermione a small, knowing smile, the sort they often exchanged when about to venture into yet another curiosity. Ron Weasley appeared a few moments later, his hair slightly tousled from leaning back in his chair by the common room fire. There was a warmth to him, a quiet reliability that came from always being ready to follow a friend, even into the strangest corners of Hogwarts. He carried a small satchel at his side, not because he had packed anything specific for the night, but because, as he'd told Harry earlier with a grin, you never know what'll be useful when a tower decides to disappear. Their quiet conversation blended easily with the soft sounds of the castle. A shared joke from Ron brought the first real laugh of the night, a warm, low sound that seemed to lighten the air. Hermione rolled her eyes in mock exasperation, but there was fondness in it, the kind that comes from years of friendship. Harry simply shook his head, smiling to himself. The three moved together now, their pace unhurried, their steps falling into a natural rhythm as they made their way toward the older wings of the school. Behind them, the common rooms were settling into silence. Ahead lay the places where dust gathered in corners and magic lingered like the aftertaste of a spell long since cast. In the stillness, their presence felt balanced. Hermione's careful attention, Harry's steady curiosity, Ron's easy warmth. Each carried their own light into the shadowed edges of the castle, and though none of them said it aloud, there was a shared understanding. They were not just exploring a story from Hogwarts' past, they were stepping into it. The old corridors beyond the grand staircase felt like a lullaby the castle hummed to itself. Stone breathed out the day's warmth in slow waves. Candles settled into their wicks with soft, occasional sighs. Harry, Hermione, and Ron let their steps match the rhythm of the hush, as if walking in time with Hogwarts' heartbeat. It was the sort of night where sound traveled kindly, no echoes to startle, only a gentle widening of each small noise, like ripples on the Black Lake. "Which records mentioned the tower first?" Harry asked, voice low, more to keep the calm intact than from any need to whisper. Hermione's fingers rested against the spines of her books as if she could read through the leather. "A footnote and topographical curiosities of Hogwarts," she murmured, smiling faintly at how right it felt to be talking like this, together, in a corridor that smelled of wax and parchment. Then the facility manifest of 1763, which lists a north-northeast instructional turret, and then nothing. Later maps skew wider between astronomy and the north parapet, like the blank where a tooth used to be. Ron's satchel thumped gently at his hip. "So we're looking for a missing tooth," he said, the words a soft chuckle that warmed the air. "We ought to leave a chocolate frog for the tooth fairy. Might get a clue." Hermione's laugh was quiet and easily given. Harry smiled without turning, only nodding toward the next turning of the corridor, where a series of narrow arrow-slit windows opened to the night. The moon stood patient above the hills, and a pale ribbon of mist lay like a scarf along the far tree line. The view felt steadying. He breathed in, and the cool threaded through his chest like a gentle charm. They chose the northern passage because it felt like a place where the castle kept its older thoughts. The stones here were a darker gray, and the mortar lines fine and neat, as though traced by a careful hand. A tapestry of a stag in winter hung just before the corner. Snow stitched into the wool scattered tiny glints when the candles flickered. "It's colder here," Ron said, not shivering, only noticing. His palm hovered near the stone, like the air keeps its sleeves rolled down. Hermione tilted her head. "Listen." At first, there was only the tiny hush of the candles and the far-off tick from a clock they could not see. But beneath it, so faint Harry wasn't certain it was there, came a sound like a broom bristle drawn softly over parchment. Not a scrape, not quite a sweep, a hushed, measured stroke. Once, then again, a third time, a breath longer. "It's coming from the corner," Harry said. They didn't hurry. They rounded the bend with a calm that kept the corridor calm with them, and there they found not a person, nor a portrait with a feather duster, but a sliver of moonlight laid across the floor as if placed by a careful hand. It slipped under the edge of the tapestry's hem and pooled at the baseboard like spilt milk. "The stag's eye," Hermione whispered. The tapestry's woven stag looked out toward the far hills, and in the soft light, the eye stitch gleamed more than the others, not bright, only steadily. She raised her wand. "Lumos," she said in the tone one uses to open curtains gently in the morning. The white glow nested in her palm, not harsh, and the stag's gaze reflected it back. For a thoughtful moment, the thread at the eye looked damp, as if it had caught a dew bead. Harry didn't need to speak. The three of them aligned to the same idea. He slipped a hand behind the tapestry, to the wall he expected, and met only a smooth draft of air. His fingers brushed space that was neither cold nor warm, but friendly. The tapestry swayed an inch, then stilled as if listening. "May I?" Hermione asked the air, with a small smile she gave to locked things she meant to be kind to. She set her hand to the woven winter and drew the tapestry aside. There was no grind of hidden hinges, no gasp of showered dust. The wool simply gave way to a shallow arch where no arch had been a blink ago, stone pale and honest, as if it had waited there all along for someone to look with the right sort of patience. The passage beyond was narrow and pleasantly lit from nowhere in particular, as if the walls themselves remembered daylight. The floor dipped down a few steps, then climbed in an easy, spiraling turn. It wasn't the complicated machinery of the grand moving staircases. This was simpler, older, stairs that minded their manners. Hermione set her light low, near her knees, so it spilled like cream over each tread. "Hogwarts sometimes opens the way it thinks you mean," she said, almost to herself. "Not a trick exactly, more a courtesy." Ron peered upward into the turn. "If we say thank you, do you think it keeps holding the door?" "It can't hurt," Harry said, and he meant it. He tipped his chin toward the arch. "Cheers," he whispered, the syllable easy as breath. The walls seemed to keep the word and soften it, the way the common room cushions kept the warmth of fire. They climbed. The air grew a little cooler with height, but never bit. On the second turn, they passed an old window shaped like a tall teardrop. The glass let a sleepy version of the moon inside, diffused and milky, as if the pane remembered fogs from long ago. Dust motes, only a very few, hung like patient stars. Hermione smiled at them as if at first years on their best behavior. The brushing sound returned. It didn't come from above or below, but through the wall to their right, moving at their pace, keeping company. Harry touched his palm to the stone and felt nothing rough, nothing that snagged at the skin. Still, the sound stayed, soft stroke, measured stroke. It could have been a quill in a far classroom, writing neat lines in an even hand. At the next landing, they found a door, no grander than a cupboard's, but tall enough that an adult wouldn't duck. Its wood was pale, the varnish gone thin from long ago polishings. A brass handle sat exactly where one would expect it, and above the handle a keyhole waited without impatience. No key was in it. Ron's fingers hovered. "Do we knock?" he asked, and the question wasn't a joke. It felt right to ask permission from a door that had not troubled anyone in years. Hermione nodded. 3 gentle taps. They were not answered by voices or rattles or charm locks. The handle warmed as though it had rested under a beam of sunlight. Harry turned it. The latch gave with the smallest click, the kind that falls into the fabric of silence rather than ripping it. The door opened inwards on a sip of cool air. The room beyond was a classroom by temperament before it was one by furniture. The light knew where to fall. Desks, 8, then 5 more, sat in an arc that left ample room for the teacher's space, though no name hung on the wall. Chalk dust, very little of it, rested in the trough beneath a slate board. The board itself was clean, except for a line of writing so narrow and faint that Hermione's light had to lean very close to coax it into view. "Read it?" Ron asked. Hermione's voice found the words as if they were a tune. "Attend kindly to what attends to you." She exhaled, a soft contentment. "That's pretty." Harry stepped in, and the floor answered with that agreeable wood hush that lives under old floorboards. He walked to the window at the far side. It didn't look out on the grounds, as the corridor's slit windows had. It looked onto a pocket of air that felt like afternoon, though it was midnight beyond the wall. A drifting of spear-thin cloud made slow work of crossing the view. If he squinted, he didn't need to. He could almost believe he saw a tower's shadow where none should be, a faint, darker smudge leaning into sky. "Do you feel that?" Hermione asked. She wasn't pointing. She simply let her hand hover over the nearest desk. Harry felt it too, a tiny vibration, not even a tremble, like the purr of a sleeping cat against one's sleeve. The wood carried it. It went quiet when he noticed it directly, then resumed the moment his attention softened, as if the room preferred to be appreciated without being interrogated. Ron had discovered a cupboard at the back, tall, painted the same pale as the door, its latch shaped like a leaf. He did not fling it open. He pressed the latch the way one presses a note in a music box. Inside, shelves held things that were not dangerous and did not pretend to be. A box of smooth river stones, labeled by color in a tidy, ancient hand. A cloth bag of brass hoops nested in one another. A jar of star-cut paper confetti faded to the color of old daffodils. Nothing sparkled. Everything was able to be held. Feels like a classroom for practicing quiet magic, Ron said, and Hermione looked so pleased with him that the room seemed to glow by a degree. At the slate board, a piece of chalk lay in the trough. It was worn more on one side, like something that had once lived in a thoughtful teacher's fingers. Hermione reached toward it, then paused. "May I?" she asked, not of Harry or Ron, but of the room itself. The chalk rolled the smallest fraction nearer. She took it up. It did not leave a chalky kiss on her skin. It felt like holding a thought. At the board, she wrote a single, courteous word. "Hello." The letters were round, the lines thin enough that the slate drank them rather than blazed them. They waited. Waiting felt right here, a posture the room approved of. The brushing sound, the hush stroke arrived again, and this time it entered with them. It grew no louder, only clearer, and Harry realized it had a rhythm he recognized. He turned, slowly, so as not to interrupt, and looked toward the window. In its afternoon pocket, wind moved through nothing visible, and yet the sound answered the chalk's presence as a bow answers a string. Below, "Hello," a second hand appeared, tidy and unhurried, as if formed from the gentlest pressure of air on slate. It wrote, "You remembered." Harry did not speak. The quiet rose to meet their attention. Ron's smile was the kind one wears in a good library. Hermione, very softly, set the chalk down as if returning a quill to a friend. "We didn't know we'd forgotten," she said into the room, not quite above a whisper. "We only felt the empty place where something used to be." The board's letters brightened a little and then settled. New words formed, patient as dew. "You came by the kind way." The chalk didn't move on its own. The letters simply appeared, line by line, with the calm of handwriting you trust. Harry felt that tiny purr through the floor again and followed it with his eyes, and that was when he noticed the marks beneath the first row of desks. Faint rings in the varnish where small round objects had once rested, not ink pots, something lighter, a memory in wood. He kneeled, touched a fingertip to a ring, and the sensation that came was not a picture, but a mood, the lovely attention of a room full of students looking inward together. He stood. "What did you teach?" he asked the slate, nicely. The reply took its time, listening to what is already there. Hermione's breath caught, not sharply, just a small astonishment, finding a soft place to land. She glanced at Harry and Ron. "Not divination," she said with a warm tilt of humor, "and not quite charms." "More like noticing," Ron offered, "only with lessons." The chalk did not lift itself, and yet the board agreed in a small, pleased curve of stroke. Attending. Then, after a pause, the tower learned to attend so well it could step aside without being lost. Harry looked again to the afternoon window. The shadow smudge of a tower leaned there, more certain now, though he could see right through it to the thin, patient clouds. "Is that what happened to you?" he asked, stepped aside. Between ticks, the board wrote. Between breath and breath, no drama came with the words, only an ease that made sense down in the bones. Hermione rested her palm to the desk nearest her. "If the tower stepped aside, can it return?" A new line formed with the steadiness of a pulse. "You have returned it by returning here in the right manner." Ron looked around, and the smile that had been mostly humor softened into one of gratitude. "So, saying please and thank you works on towers too." The board's next words brightened a fraction, amused without mockery. "It works on everything that listens." Silence arrived again, not empty, satisfied. In that fullness, the classroom did a very gentle thing. The light at the window eased from its pocket afternoon toward the moon white of the true night outside, as if two skins of time were laying themselves together. The air did not shiver. It settled. Harry watched the space where the tower shadow had been, and for a kind, lingering moment, he saw both truths at once. The castle as it was, and the castle remembering itself. Hermione returned the chalk to the trough. The tiny purr in the floor eased, not gone, only content. She brushed her thumb unconsciously along the curve of her wand, not to cast, simply to say, "I'm here." "What should we do next?" Harry asked, not to push the moment forward, but to give it room. The answer came in the same careful script. "Go slowly. Leave the door as you found it. Carry the room with you by the way you walk." Ron nodded, and that was that. No relics to pocket, no rush to write their names somewhere. The discovery itself felt like a page you did not tear from a book, because the book liked to be whole. They took their time crossing back to the door. The boards gave them courteous hushes with each step. At the threshold, Harry looked once more at the slate. The first hello still shone faintly, and beneath it the message stayed, "You remembered." It did not fade as they watched. It didn't need to. Hermione drew the door to with a careful hand. It closed with a click. The corridor accepted easily. Ron let his palm rest a second against the pale wood. "Thank you," he said in a voice he'd used to a friend who had waited. The brushing sound, soft stroke, measured stroke, kept them company down the first curve of the stair, then dwindled into the agreeable quiet of the castle's night. When they reached the winter stag tapestry, the hem settled back against the stone with a small sigh, as if satisfied with how the evening had gone. They did not speak for a little while. Words would have pressed against what the room had given them. When they did, it was Hermione first, and her voice wore the smile she hadn't quite put on her mouth. "Between breath and breath," she said, like a bookmark she would never misplace. Harry's nod answered in rhythm, attending. He felt no need to hurry toward the next thing. The corridor held them like a hand. Ron's satchel thumped softly, a homely sound that made the mystery feel even kinder. "I reckon," he said, "if a tower can step aside and not be lost, then so can a person, sometimes." The castle seemed to agree. The candles bowed a little in their sconces, sending soft gold to beat along the mortar lines like tiny, patient constellations. And somewhere far above, in a place only the owls knew, a bell that was not a bell marked the end of a lesson with a tone too gentle to be called a chime, a breath of sound that simply said, "Enough for now." They walked on, not away from the classroom, but with it, as if the room had tucked itself in the fold between heartbeat and breath where remembered things live. The mystery had not become louder, it had become deeper and kinder, and in the quiet that followed, Hogwarts felt even more like home. The tapestry of the winter stag swayed softly in the still corridor, as though the breath of the hidden classroom still lingered in its threads. Harry, Hermione, and Ron lingered there for a moment, each of them listening for something they couldn't quite name. The room they had just left had not closed like a locked door. It had folded itself out like a page in a book, quietly marked for them alone. They started back toward the Gryffindor Tower at an easy pace, footsteps slow enough for the castle's soft nighttime sounds to settle back around them. But as they passed the next stretch of corridor, something subtle yet unmistakable shifted. The air, which moments ago had been perfectly still, carried with it the faintest scent of rain. Not the sharp freshness of a storm, but the memory of rain, the earthy coolness that clings to stone after it has been soaked and left to dry. Ron sniffed once. "Smells like outside." Hermione turned her head, her brow furrowing. "Yes, and we're 3 floors up, and that window hasn't been opened since, well, probably not in years." Harry followed the scent to the far end of the corridor, where a narrow side passage branched away toward the east. It was dimmer there, the light from the candles not quite reaching the far wall. The shadows seemed thicker, yet not menacing, more like the soft darkness of a curtained room waiting to be drawn open. They walked toward it without hurrying, and the smell of rain deepened with each step. A faint sound began to rise through the quiet, a steady, soft patter, like drops striking stone. The sound was gentle enough that it might have been missed if they had been speaking. The passage ended at an archway that looked utterly ordinary, but as they stepped through it, they found themselves in a place none of them had seen before. It was a corridor, but it had the quality of a conservatory. The walls on either side were lined with tall, arched windows, their glass so clear it was as if nothing separated them from the view beyond. Yet the view was impossible. Instead of the familiar grounds of Hogwarts, the windows opened onto a series of narrow stone bridges suspended high over a mist-filled gorge. Rain drifted down in slow, silver streaks, each droplet catching the light of a hidden moon before it vanished into the depths below. The bridges curved away into the mist, linking to towers that did not exist on any map of the castle. They rose like ghostly silhouettes, faint but solid enough to catch the rain. "Those towers," Harry said softly, stepping closer to the glass. "They weren't here before." Hermione's eyes darted from one shadowy shape to another. "No, I think these are part of the same, whatever it is, that the vanished tower was. They've stepped aside, too." Ron reached out, pressing his fingertips to the glass. Instead of the cool, hard feel of window pane, there was the sensation of air, cool, damp, and fresh from the rain. He jerked his hand back in surprise, then grinned. "It's not glass at all. You can step right through." They looked at each other for a moment. Then Harry took a slow, deliberate breath and stepped forward. His foot met stone, firm and sure, and the cool mist curled around his ankles like welcome smoke. The rain wasn't cold here. It was a soft, almost warm drizzle, like the first rain of spring. Hermione followed, her expression shifting from caution to wonder, and Ron brought up the rear, still glancing back as if expecting the archway to close. The bridge stretched ahead, its surface dark with moisture, the railings lined with moss. The mist parted in gentle curls as they walked, revealing glimpses of the towers ahead. Each tower was slightly different, one with narrow, spiraling windows that glowed faintly from within, another with roof tiles the deep green of old copper. None looked abandoned, yet there was no movement, no sound, but the rain and their own steady footsteps. Halfway across the bridge, Harry stopped. "Do you hear that?" Hermione tilted her head. Beneath the rain's patter came a low, resonant hum, like a single note sung by a distant choir. It wasn't loud. It seemed to exist more in the bones than in the ears, vibrating gently through their chests. They followed the sound to the first tower. The doorway was arched and tall, with no visible handle, but as they approached, it opened with a slow, smooth motion. The air inside was warmer, scented faintly with cedar and candle smoke. The hum grew clearer. It came from the center of the round chamber they had entered, where a circular pool of water lay perfectly still despite the open roof above. The rain fell into the pool, but instead of rippling outward, each drop disappeared with a small shimmer of light. Around the pool's edge were carved symbols, some familiar from Rune's class, others entirely unknown. Hermione knelt, tracing one of the carvings with her fingertip. "These are markers. They look like points on a map, but not of the castle. It's something bigger." Harry crouched beside her, watching the drops vanish into light. "Do you think this is connected to the tower we found?" "I think," Hermione said. "This is part of the same network, not just one tower, but many, hidden from view until you know how to look." Ron was peering up through the open roof. "And the rain, it's not touching the floor except in the pool. It's like it knows where it's meant to go." As they watched, one of the symbols began to glow faintly, a small, star-shaped marking near the pool's edge. The hum deepened, and the light from the rain shimmered brighter. For a moment, Harry thought he saw a faint image in the pool, not a reflection, but another place entirely. A high, sunlit room filled with tall windows and bookshelves, with a single desk set before an enormous map. Then, just as suddenly, the image faded, and the pool returned to its still, dark surface. The hum softened to silence. They didn't feel disappointment, rather, the same quiet contentment as when the hidden classroom had let them go. It was an invitation, not a command. Another step in a path that the castle seemed to be revealing at its own pace. Hermione smiled faintly. "I think the towers are talking to each other. And to us," Harry added. Ron gave a small nod, glancing back toward the bridge. "Well, I suppose we'd better keep listening." They stepped back into the soft rain, the mist curling to guide them onward. The bridge behind them was already fading, not vanishing entirely, but becoming part of the rain's silver veil. Ahead, another tower waited, its windows glowing like warm embers in the gentle night. Whatever mystery had begun with the vanished classroom was deepening, but not with urgency. The towers would wait for them, and Hogwarts would keep its secrets until the right footsteps returned again. The mist curled gently around them as they left the cedar-scented tower and stepped once more onto the narrow bridge. The rain had softened to an almost imperceptible drizzle, each droplet now so light it seemed to pause in the air before drifting down. Somewhere far above, a moon-shaped glow shimmered in the mist, but the light here was diffuse, with no sharp edges, like the soft glow through an old parchment lampshade. They moved together at an easy pace, the wet stone beneath their feet firm and steady. The air carried a faint, musical hum again, though different this time. Not the deep note of the previous tower, but something higher, softer, like a single string of a harp brushed once and left to fade. "It's coming from ahead," Harry murmured, his voice just above the sound of the rain. Ron tilted his head, brow creasing in thought. "Feels like it's calling. Not loud, though. More like it's letting us know it's there if we want to visit." Hermione's lips curved in a small smile. "That's exactly it. None of this has been demanding. It's all invitations." The bridge curved lazily to the right, and as the mist thinned, they caught their first glimpse of the next tower. This one was unlike the others. Its walls were covered in ivy, but the leaves glowed faintly, as though lit from within, each one holding a different hue: pale gold, soft green, gentle rose. The windows were small and round, like portholes, and each glowed with a warm, flickering light that suggested not just candles, but a hearth within. The doorway was already open when they arrived, a half-arch of carved stone with tiny reliefs of flowers and vines. As they stepped inside, the air warmed instantly, not just in temperature, but in feeling, as though the very space welcomed their presence. The scent of fresh herbs floated gently in the air. Rosemary, chamomile, lavender. The round chamber within was lined with low shelves, each holding carefully arranged bundles of dried flowers, jars of soft powders, and bowls of clear water that reflected the flicker of the hearth. The hum they had heard outside was louder here, but still delicate. It came from a cluster of crystal chimes hanging above the hearth, swaying slightly in a breeze they could not feel. Hermione's eyes lit with recognition. This must have been a place of healing or study for healing magic. Look at the organization, the balance in the room. It feels restorative. Harry walked slowly around the perimeter, noting the way the ivy from outside pushed through the stone in places, its leaves still glowing faintly in the indoor light. When he passed one such section, the hum shifted. A single higher tone sounded, clear and brief, before returning to the deeper harmony. "Did you hear that?" he asked, looking over his shoulder. Ron nodded, joining him by the wall. "It's like it reacted to you." Hermione approached, reaching toward the ivy. "Not just to him. I think it responds to attention." Her fingers brushed one leaf, and it glowed a fraction brighter before the chimes gave a quiet, answering note. It was Ron, however, who discovered the second surprise. At the far side of the room, half hidden behind a low curtain of trailing vine, stood a narrow wooden door, no taller than a cupboard. Its handle was made of twisted brass, warm to the touch. When he opened it, instead of revealing a storage space, the door opened onto a short, curved passage lined entirely with polished stone. The walls shimmered faintly, as though the stone held captured sunlight. The passage ended in another door, this one arched and made of pale oak, carved with a single symbol in the center, a circle containing a smaller, six-pointed star. Hermione ran her fingers over the carving, brow furrowed in thought. I've seen this before, in old notes about restorative charms. It's a symbol for balance and renewal. When they stepped through, they found themselves in a small circular balcony open to the mist. From here, they could see the bridge they had crossed, the towers they had visited, and, faintly, in the far distance, a shape that seemed larger than the rest, its outline blurred by the drifting rain. Harry leaned on the smooth stone railing. That one. That must be the heart of all this, the central tower. Ron let out a low breath. Looks like it's waiting for us. Hermione's eyes softened, but not yet. They stood for a while in the quiet, the hum of the healing tower surrounding them, the mist curling close like a blanket. Then, as naturally as it had begun, the sound began to fade. The glow of the ivy leaves dimmed, though not to darkness, only to a resting light, like embers settling. It was a gentle signal that their visit here was done for now. When they retraced their steps through the curved passage and back to the main chamber, they found that the herbs seemed to have shifted slightly, as if the room had been tidied in their absence. The hearth still burned, but lower, its flames drowsy and content. Back on the bridge, the rain had thinned to a faint mist. The next span stretched toward the largest shadowed shape they had yet seen, the central tower Hermione had spotted from the balcony. Its outline rose higher than the others, and though its walls were still hazy in the mist, a faint glow pulsed gently at its highest point, like the heartbeat of the entire hidden network. They walked on, slowly, letting the anticipation grow at its own pace. The bridges between them and the Heart Tower were longer now, each one lined with subtle changes. Here a section of rail with carved runes, there a cluster of lanterns that lit as they approached, their light soft and steady. It was as though each span was preparing them for the place ahead. Harry felt it in his chest before he saw it clearly, that deep hum returning, the same note they had heard in the first rain tower, but fuller now, layered with the delicate tones of the healing ivy chamber. "Whatever's in there," Ron said quietly, "I think it's been listening to us this whole time." Hermione nodded, her eyes fixed on the dim, glowing crown of the tower ahead. "And I think it knows we're coming." The mist thickened once more, curling protectively around the final bridge, as though offering them the chance to pause and breathe before stepping into the next chapter of the mystery. The final bridge stretched before them, the mist shifting in slow waves, as though it too were watching their approach. The pulsing glow from the central tower's crown was stronger now, not blinding, but steady, like the breathing of a great, sleeping creature. Each step they took sent a faint vibration through the stone underfoot, not threatening, just a reminder that the path itself was aware of their presence. They didn't rush. The air here felt different, thicker with magic, yet soft, as if it had been filtered through centuries of patient use. As they reached the midpoint of the bridge, the mist ahead parted slightly, revealing the entrance to the tower, a tall double door of polished dark wood inlaid with a pattern of interwoven circles. No handle was visible, but a shallow indentation in the shape of a hand rested at the center. Harry reached out instinctively, but paused. He glanced at Hermione and Ron, and for a moment, none of them spoke. This wasn't just a doorway. It felt like a threshold in every sense of the word. Whoever touched it first would be the one the tower addressed. Ron gave a half smile. "You're the one who always ends up in the middle of these things, Harry." Hermione, though smiling faintly, didn't entirely agree. "It should be all of us. If this tower is connected to the others, then maybe it's looking for more than one person, more than one way of seeing." The decision came naturally. They stepped forward together, each placing a hand in the indentation. The wood was cool at first, then warmed under their touch. The inlaid circles shimmered faintly, and with a low, resonant hum, the door swung open. Inside was a wide, circular hall lit from above by a skylight of pale crystal that glowed as if holding captured dawn. The walls were lined with tall alcoves, each containing an object: a compass with no needle, an hourglass whose sand hung suspended in midair, a quill that wrote slowly across a scroll, though no ink touched its tip. Between the alcoves, narrow staircases spiraled upward toward higher levels, their edges marked by runes that glimmered briefly as they passed. In the center of the hall stood a circular platform engraved with a map, not of Hogwarts, nor of the surrounding grounds, but of the hidden towers themselves. The bridges between them were marked as silver threads, each pulsing faintly. 3 of the threads glowed more brightly than the rest, tracing the paths they had walked tonight. Harry crouched to study it. "It's showing where we've been." Hermione nodded slowly, her eyes moving across the map. "And where we could go. Look, there are other towers we haven't seen yet. Some are further away, connected by paths we couldn't see before." Ron leaned over the edge of the platform. "So, what? It's giving us options?" The map seemed to answer him. One of the unvisited towers flared briefly, its thread glowing brighter, while another dimmed almost to nothing. It was as if the tower itself was offering choices, but gently, leaving the decision in their hands. Hermione moved her fingers above the glowing thread without touching it. "It's waiting for us to decide. Not tonight, maybe not even soon, but it's showing us that there's more to find, and that the path we choose will shape what we learn." They stood in thoughtful silence. The hum of the hall was steady and warm, without any sense of pressure. It was not a test, only an invitation to continue when they were ready. At the base of one staircase, a small alcove caught Harry's attention. Inside, on a low stone pedestal, lay a simple wooden box with a hinged lid. No lock, no magical seal. He lifted it carefully. Inside were 3 small tokens, each carved from smooth stone, one shaped like a leaf, one like a star, and one like a spiral. Ron picked up the spiral and turned it in his palm. It feels like it's meant to be carried. Hermione studied the other 2. I think they're markers, reminders of the choices we make. Maybe the towers recognize them. Without needing to speak, they each took one. Harry the star, Hermione the leaf, Ron the spiral. As soon as the tokens left the box, the platform map shifted subtly, marking their positions with tiny points of light. When they stepped back, the doors behind them eased open, and a faint breeze drifted in from the bridge. The glow in the skylight softened, as though the tower was settling into a quieter state. Hermione smiled, tucking the leaf-shaped token into her pocket. I think this is its way of saying our visit is done for now. Harry nodded, casting one last glance at the map, and that it'll still be here when we're ready to come back. As they left the hall and stepped onto the bridge, the mist swirled in a slow, graceful arc, parting to reveal the familiar outlines of Hogwarts in the distance. The hidden network of towers would fade again, hidden until they sought it with the right kind of attention, and for the first time since the mystery had begun, they realized they weren't just exploring lost places, they were becoming part of the map themselves. The mist closed in softly behind them as they stepped off the bridge and back into the central tower's entrance hall. The quiet here felt different now, not the hushed uncertainty of arriving, but the deep calm of a place that had been waiting for something and finally received it. The faint hum they had heard earlier returned, richer now, as if layered with voices too gentle to distinguish. Harry's gaze drifted again to the platform map in the center of the room. The silver threads between the towers glowed faintly, but there was something new. A faint golden light now pulsed from the center of the platform, radiating outward along the lines they had walked that night. The glow was steady and patient, like a heart that had just found its rhythm. Hermione stepped closer, eyes narrowing with focus. "It's responding to us," she said softly. "Look, the glow is strongest on the paths we've taken. We've completed a loop." Ron frowned, though his voice was more thoughtful than doubtful. "A loop? You mean we just walked in a circle?" Hermione shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, not a physical loop, a loop of connection. I think the towers remember one another through us. By visiting them in a certain way, we've relinked something that was broken." As if to confirm her words, the map shimmered, and a faint image rose above it. Not quite a projection, but a ghostly model of Hogwarts, towers and all. The main, familiar structure stood in the center, but now, faintly around it, the hidden towers appeared, not fully solid, but no longer entirely absent. They flickered between visibility and transparency, like a reflection on water that catches light only at certain angles. Harry stared at the image. "It's showing us what Hogwarts would look like if all the towers were here all the time." Ron's voice was quiet now. "So why hide them in the first place?" The answer didn't come in words. Instead, the room itself seemed to respond. The skylight above shifted in hue, becoming the soft blue of early morning, and the air grew warmer. On the map, one of the hidden towers glowed more brightly, and a single silver thread extended from it toward the main structure of Hogwarts. Hermione's eyes widened. They were part of the school once, fully part of it, but they stepped aside, like the vanished tower we found earlier. Harry nodded slowly. To keep something safe? The hum deepened again, and a ripple of warmth moved through the floor beneath them. For a moment, each of them felt a distinct impression, not a clear image, but a shared understanding. The towers were never lost. They had been watching, listening, waiting for the right kind of attention to draw them back into connection. It wasn't about keeping people out. It was about ensuring that only those who could move through them with care and respect would even notice they were there. Ron exhaled, shaking his head slowly. So it's not really about finding the towers. It's about becoming the sort of person the towers let find them. Hermione's voice was soft. Exactly. And now that we've walked this path, we're part of the network. Harry looked down at the star-shaped token in his hand. It glowed faintly now, a tiny echo of the map's light. Hermione's leaf and Ron's spiral were glowing too, their light gentle but steady. Without speaking, they knew these tokens weren't just keepsakes. They were keys, markers of the bond they had reawakened. The image above the map slowly faded, the silver threads dimming until they became only faint outlines. The hum receded to a soft, almost imperceptible vibration in the air. The tower was returning to its rest, its task for the night complete. Hermione looked around one last time, her eyes full of quiet gratitude. This wasn't just a mystery to solve. It was a lesson about paying attention, about moving slowly enough to notice the things that are always here but rarely seen. Harry smiled faintly. Between breath and breath, he said, recalling the words from the vanished classroom. Ron gave a quiet laugh. Yeah, and apparently, between bridge and bridge, too. They turned toward the doors, which opened as they approached, revealing the mist-swathed bridge back toward the castle. As they stepped through, each of them glanced back at the map platform, now dim and still, and the skylight above, its crystal glow fading to the soft darkness of night. The central tower didn't vanish behind them. Instead, it seemed to recede into the mist, its shape growing fainter until it became part of the rain's silver curtain once more. But the warmth they had felt, the connection they had restored, lingered with them, not just in their tokens, but in the way they walked, in the way they looked at the castle around them. For the first time since the mystery had begun, they understood. The vanished tower, the rain bridges, the healing chamber, they were all part of a living memory, a hidden layer of Hogwarts that revealed itself only when approached with patience, respect, and a willingness to listen. And somewhere high above, beyond the mist and moonlight, the other towers waited. The mist along the final bridge thinned as they walked, and the first outlines of Hogwarts began to emerge ahead, towers they knew well, windows glowing softly against the night. The rain had ceased entirely now, leaving only the faint scent of damp stone and the cool freshness that follows a gentle shower. They moved slowly, not because the path was difficult, but because there was no reason to rush. The central tower's quiet hum still lingered in their bones, a low warmth that seemed to steady their steps. The silver threads between the hidden towers might have faded from sight, but in their minds, they were still there, each path they had walked tonight still glowing softly in memory. Ron broke the silence first, his voice low and almost amused. Feels strange, doesn't it? Coming back the same way, but not really the same at all. Hermione nodded, glancing back over her shoulder. The mist was already swallowing the bridge and the towers behind them. That's the thing about Hogwarts, she said quietly. You can walk the same corridors every day and still never see everything there is to see. Harry looked toward the castle ahead, its familiar shapes steady and sure. And maybe that's the point, not to see it all at once, just to keep noticing. They crossed into the main grounds and stepped back into the familiar courtyard. The stones here were cool underfoot, but the air was warmer, carrying the scent of the greenhouses and the faint hum of the castle settling deeper into its night's rest. Above, the stars had returned, peeking through gaps in the drifting clouds. Inside, the corridors glowed softly with candlelight. Portraits nodded in drowsy greeting, some too sleepy to speak. The great suits of armor stood silent and still, their metal catching the occasional gleam from passing flames. The warmth of the main castle wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, a different kind of magic from the towers, but no less real. As they neared the Gryffindor common room, Ron gave a small, quiet yawn. You know, for all that walking, I don't feel tired in the bad way. It's more like the good kind, when you've been somewhere worth going. Hermione smiled, her leaf-shaped token safe in her pocket. That's because we didn't just walk through places, we connected them, and they connected us back. Harry glanced at the star token in his hand before tucking it away. I think that's something we're meant to carry with us, not just in here. He tapped the token, then his chest. The fat lady stirred in her portrait as they approached, her eyes half closed, but her smile warm. Back late, I see, she murmured, opening the way without a password. The common room was dim, lit only by the last embers in the fireplace. They moved quietly, each slipping into their own familiar evening rhythm. Ron leaving his satchel by his chair, Hermione placing her books neatly on a side table, Harry pausing for a moment by the fire before heading toward the stairs. The night had given them no grand, final flourish, no booming revelation or rush of magic. Instead, it had ended as it began, in calm, in quiet, in the steady breath of a castle that would always have more to show. Somewhere beyond the mist, the hidden towers would rest until they were ready to return, and when they did, the paths would be there, waiting for the right kind of footsteps. For now, Hogwarts was enough, warm, safe, and alive in the stillness of the hour before sleep. The common room was nearly silent now, save for the faint whisper of the fire settling into embers. Shadows moved softly across the walls as the flames shifted, wrapping the room in a slow, gentle rhythm. Outside the tall windows, the last wisps of cloud drifted away, leaving the night sky clear and wide, its stars steady and calm. Harry paused at the bottom of the stairs, letting his eyes linger on the quiet scene, the armchairs sitting in companionable silence, the books waiting patiently on the side table, the warmth of the fire still holding the chill of the stone at bay. This was Hogwarts at rest, breathing in time with those who called it home. Hermione sat for a moment longer by the hearth, one hand resting lightly on her pocket where the leaf-shaped token lay. She didn't need to look at it to know it was there. The memory of the night's journey was already part of her, tucked safely away like a well-marked page in a favorite book. Ron stretched once, a soft sigh escaping him, and glanced toward the windows. "Feels like the towers are still out there," he murmured, not to break the quiet, but to place the thought gently into it. "They are," Hermione said, her voice warm and certain, "and they'll still be there when we're ready to walk that way again." The fire popped softly, as though agreeing the castle's magic, the kind you didn't find in spells or charms, seemed to wrap around them, steady and familiar. There was no urgency now, only the promise that some mysteries wait not to be solved, but to be visited again when the moment is right. Harry took a last look at the common room before climbing the stairs. He carried with him the warmth of the embers, the scent of rain on old stone, and the memory of bridges winding through the mist toward places only those who noticed could find. If you are still here, listening, let the quiet of this moment settle into you. Imagine the slow crackle of the hearth, the soft rustle of the curtains in the night breeze, and the steady heartbeat of the castle holding you safe. Rest now, knowing the hidden towers are out there, waiting in their own time, and that you'll always have a place to return to in the calm, watchful heart of Hogwarts. The night is yours, and the story will be here when you wake.